Today we're making one of my all-time favorite fall treats, apple pie hand cookies. These are so delicious. On the inside, there's a homemade caramel with a homemade apple pie filling on top of that, and it's all wrapped up in a cinnamon spiced pastry crust that is flaky and delicious. If this looks like a lot of work to you and you're like, no, not today, you could also make the homey version, which is equally as delicious. It kind of looks like a big dumpling, but it's so fast and easy to make. If you like my videos, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Okay, let's get started. For the pastry crust, we're starting off with 3 cups or 300 grams of all-purpose flour right into my food processor. If you use a kitchen scale, it is so easy to measure flour. If you don't, you have to worry about fluffing things up the right way, and it's a whole deal, but kitchen scale, just dump it in slowly, and 300, we're done. Now we're using a 1/4 cup of sugar. You can use a little bit less, but actually a 1/4 cup isn't that much, so it's not gonna be super sweet. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now for the cinnamon. On the recipe, I have all these spices in that crust, and it is delicious. But if you want it to look kind of like more of a traditional apple pie and be not so dark, just use less. So I'm gonna get 1/2 teaspoon and a whole teaspoon of ground cinnamon. That's gonna be plenty. Now we take our food processor and reattach it and just whiz it a few times. Oh, nice and mixed up. Now we can add in 1 cup or 2 sticks of unsalted butter. It has to be cold. You want to have little pea-sized granules of butter, but here's the real. A lot of people are like, okay, little pea-sized granules of butter, the butter has to be intact. This is totally true. It's gonna be flaky and delicious, but if you wanna do any detail work, like making a lattice, cutting shapes, doing anything fancy, those butter pieces are gonna dissolve and ruin everything. So there's a trade-off. If you wanna do like a really rustic pie crust, like I did for my pumpkin pie, which you can click up here for, it'll look totally nice and be really flaky and delicious. But if you wanna do some detailed work and not be frustrated, you're gonna want those butter pieces to be slightly smaller. Not completely incorporated, but smaller. They're about pea size now, and I'm gonna add in my ice water. A lot of recipes say just 1 little drizzle of ice water. It's not enough. I don't know how they make things happen, but you need a little bit more. So at least 2 tablespoons of ice water, all the way up to a 1/4 cup. So now we're gonna add this in while we pulse. Pulse. 2 tablespoons, 3, and don't tell any of the other YouTubers or anybody else, but I'm adding in a 4th tablespoon. You're gonna dump this out, and it's gonna look like it's really like crummy, not gonna work, but some magic's about to happen. All right, this doesn't look like dough at all. What's the problem here? Well, all you have to do is form it together. Watch this. That's so cool. Okay, so just shape it together with your hands. We're gonna knead it just a couple times to bring it together, and it's gonna rest in the fridge for like 20 minutes to half an hour, or overnight if you're doing this in stages, which I always recommend if you have kids or are busy. And then it'll rest and come together into a disc that's really nice and workable. Put this in a plastic bag. Get all that dough off your fingers. Don't eat it all because you need it for your pie crust. Before I roll this out, I wanna bring something to your attention. If you wanna do like a nice lattice design or have the pie crust be a little thick, make a double batch. You don't need to double the caramel. This makes a lot of caramel, and you don't need to double the filling. It makes enough filling for about 12 or so. Take this, we're gonna roll it out just a little bit with our rolling pin to give it a head start. Now I can seal this, transfer this to a fridge, let it rest, and then while that's happening, we're going to be making our caramel and our apple pie filling. Never use store-bought filling. It's not cool. For the filling, I'm using about 3 pounds of Honeycrisp apples because they're my favorite, but they're pretty pricey, so you can use any apple that you like except Red Delicious because nobody should like those apples. Okay, start off by peeling them. Doesn't have to be a perfect peel, but it should be. If you don't have your apples brown while you peel them, go ahead and just pop them into a bowl of some cold water with a little bit of lemon juice, and that'll keep them nice and bright. Once your apples are peeled, you're gonna slice the flesh away from the core. Then give them like just a nice slice. You'll be chopping up the finished apple pie filling at the end of this because these cookies are pretty small and you want to have the bite-sized apple pieces, not huge slices of apple. It'll make everything nicer and the lattice will rest more evenly on that chopped up pie filling. Now I'm going to dump these apples into a bowl. I'm adding the juice of a lemon, kind of optional, but I think what makes an apple pie great, besides the apples and the pastry and everything else, is the zing of a lemon. My mom will do this with a little bit of lemon zest too, but I'm just going to add the juice. These apples are sweet, but there's always room for more sugar, so I'm adding in 2/3 of a cup of granulated sugar. You can reduce that down to 1/2 cup or 1/3 if you like things to be a little bit more tart, less sweet. Healthy pinch of nutmeg, it is the holidays. And then 1/2 teaspoon or so of ground cinnamon. I'm going to use my clean hands and give this a toss to distribute those ingredients. And this could be like the perfect snack, but I'm going to cook it down and make it real tasty for you. I'm adding my prepared apple mixture into a pan with 4 tablespoons of melted butter over like medium heat. Cook it down until that sugar melts. Once the sugar's melted, we're going to cover it up and cook on medium-low for about maybe 10 minutes. Homemade caramel is one of the simpler pleasures in life, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So easy. 1 cup of dark brown sugar, 1/2 cup of heavy cream. I'm using 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then there is a tablespoon of vanilla, but I'm going to put that in at the end. I'm going to whisk this up just really quickly. Okay, now it already looks kind of caramelly, but we have to raise that temperature up. So we're going to cook it over medium-ish heat. Stir, stir, stir this. You're going to see bubbles forming on the outside, then on the inside, and those bubbles will become larger as this thickens up. Once thick, you will know it. You can use the back of a wooden spoon and swipe it along, but it's going to become very clear this has thickened up considerably when it's cooked. All right, the caramel's all thickened up. I'm going to transfer it to a large-ish bowl so it can cool down more quickly. We're going to use it fairly soon. Look at that drip. Oh, this stuff is like liquid heaven, but don't touch it. It's super hot. Be careful. My apples are perfectly soft, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to add this into a colander over a bowl to separate the apples from the juices because the apples are done, but those juices need to get thickened up. This smells so good, by the way. Woof. Shake all those juices out. You can move the apples around a bit. Transfer those juices back into the pan, and we're going to cook this down over medium heat again until this becomes like a delicious apple caramel. Toss that with the apples again, and everything is going to be nice and perfect for these apple pie cookies. I actually made a couple different versions of this dough. This is the one I made for you just a little while ago with like that 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. This one has all the spices in the blog recipe, including the full amount of cinnamon, and it makes a big difference. This looks like whole wheat dough to me though, so I'm like, not so attractive. But when you cook it up and add the egg wash on, you won't be able to tell the difference at all, and it'll be nice and spicy and delicious. Anyways, I'm gonna use the lighter version though. So start off with the pastry mat and then add a nice sprinkle of flour. If your pastry dough is cracking, it might be a little bit too cold. You can fix it by pinching it together, but feel free to let it warm up for just a little bit longer. Add this onto your pastry mat. Sprinkle a little bit more flour. You don't want it sticking to the rolling pin. Now we're gonna roll it out. And then after you roll each time, check for cracks, pinch them together if you see any, and then move it. Don't let the dough stay in the same place for too long because it will end up sticking. Pinch, 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 pinch. If you have a tear, just pinch it together like that. That solves most of your problems. For these apple pie cookies, I'm using a circular cookie cutter. Get a set of these. I have a concentric circle set, so there's tiny little ones all the way to this is the largest size, and they come in handy all the time. I use these all the time. Cut your shapes out. See, released from the pastry mat because I was moving it along and it was floured. Don't let that pastry dough stick. It'll make you really sad. We're gonna transfer these onto a baking sheet with a Silpat. If you don't have a Silpat, don't worry. Just use some parchment paper and you'll be a-okay. Make sure to give yourself a little bit of space on the baking sheet because you're actually going to be assembling directly on the baking sheet and cleaning things up directly on the baking sheet, so you don't want to be too crowded. Now you have like some nice pristine pastry and then all these little scraps. The scraps we're just going to gather up, and then later on we'll be rolling it all together to make more pristine pastry. It's not trash. We're going to cut our strips now, so just eyeball it with a ruler. You want nice straight strips, but the width is totally up to you. I usually cut ones that are about 1/2 inch thick. To make this all work for the assembly, use an egg wash. I'm not going to show you on camera, but an egg wash is just an egg, a tablespoon of cream, mix it up, and then you brush it on, and it's a beautiful glue for pastry, and it makes everything this gorgeous golden color. Don't overdo it though. You don't want to go crazy. I have my caramel. It's really thick, but that's totally fine. I'm just going to add it into the center like a nice gloop. Feel free to spread it out. During baking, it will definitely even out and ooze too, so you don't have to worry about having like a perfect disc of caramel in the center. Okay, I have a lot of extra caramel left over. Bottle it up, use it for later. It is good on cakes, in your mouth, everywhere. Now we're gonna add that apple pie filling in, and don't go crazy. I know you wanna like pile it up to the sky, but it will just ooze out. So, you know, 1.5 tablespoons is the perfect amount. So let's add in that dollop. There. If it spills out, don't worry. It's gonna get a little bit messy, I'm warning you. Okay, add in another tablespoon there. I am so excited to eat these, I can't even tell you. I don't know if it comes across in the close-up shot, but this is bonkers. Here's where it gets a little bit messy, and you're definitely gonna be rolling out this scrap fabric and maybe even using a second batch of dough, depending on how many strips you want to put on. The more strips, I think it looks the more pretty, but you're also using more pastry, so life is a balance. So let's add that first strip on here. 1, cut that piece off. That gets put to the edge. 2, it's looking cute already. And 3. Here is where I, the forgetful baker, always forget to do the egg wash, because you want to egg wash this first layer and then put the second part of the lattice on so it sticks together. Now we're ready for the other part of the lattice. So, number 1, number 2. Look how pretty that looks already. And number 4. All right, so what about the edges? You're not going to cut it away with a knife. That's going to be a little bit messy and crazy. So we're going to use that cookie cutter again and just go pop, clean it all up. It'll look perfect. All right, so plop that cookie cutter down. Clear the excess scraps away, which we'll probably use later. And carefully bring it back up. There, that looks nice. Last step. Final egg wash over the top layer. And we're gonna finish this off with a sprinkling of sugar to catch the light. That was just enough pastry to do my 6 cookies, but I made extra, and I will show you how to make the easy peasy dumpling version of this. So fast and simple, but maybe not as pretty as this apple pie hand cookie. Final dusting of sugar. Ooh, light dusting, people. Now these are gonna go into the oven at 350. You could also do like 375 for 20 minutes or so. I'll put the correct time in the subtitles, but it's until these are nice and golden brown. Golden, so make sure you put it in one way, like after 10 minutes, switch it around. I know my oven is a little bit warm in the back, but if yours perfectly cooks, don't worry about that. All right, into the oven. Those guys are in the oven, but while they're baking up, let me show you how to make those dumplings. So easy and fast. I know you're busy, but everyone likes delicious things. Cut a circle out. If you don't have a circle cutter, just do a rough cut. This is all you're gonna use. Let's add in a little bit of caramel. Just pop that in there. So add in less than a tablespoon, or depending on the size, just don't overfill. Now use an egg wash. Run it around the edge. This is the glue that's gonna hold it together, so you wanna have like a nice seal. And now just fold it over, just like that. If it breaks, like mine just did, it's okay. because you're gonna bake this up and it's kind of gonna ooze everywhere. It's not gonna have the best structural integrity, but that's it. Pop some holes in there and then brush it with an egg wash. And if you want, you can sprinkle it with some sugar and you're done. Much faster, it'll be equally delicious, I promise, and it'll be a little bit oozy. Don't worry about that. If you wanna make it look nicer, have at it. I'm so torn. You're so beautiful. You're so easy. They're both delicious. I have to show you this pie filling coming through in the lattice. It is like translucent and caramel colored. It screams fall, and the smell is divine. I'm gonna photograph these though, so you get eaten first. I just personified these like they're living creatures, even though they're food. Okay. Whoa, oh my God. This pie crust is so flaky, it dissolves in your mouth. And that caramel just melted with the apple pie filling. Oh. This is like, I am having like a moment. It's so good. You've got to make this recipe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.